Welcome back, everyone, to Ask Avidian. Robert, today we're going to talk about Restaurant Week.
That's dumb, Jake.
Why is it dumb? Restaurant Week is something that happens every year in Houston. It goes to a great cause, provides funds to the Houston Food Bank. I don't think that's dumb. Why would you say the Houston Food Bank is dumb?
All right, well, for the record, I don't hate Restaurant Week. In fact, I love Restaurant Week. I take advantage of it almost every single day. I just don't see how it can connect back to this show, but I'm very excited to figure out how this analogy pans out.
Yeah, well, that's what we're going to use the left side of our brain here, right? This is the creative side. Is that the left side or is the right side?
I don't know. I can't keep track.
Either way, I'm going to use the creative side of my brain to draw some connections here. So as I was experiencing Restaurant Week, and again, love my pork chop at Sal's down on the corner, I was observing the kitchen, right, because I was having lunch with my wife and she was talking, so I felt like I should drift. So observing what's going on in the kitchen, and, I see the chef busy in the background. They got one of these open format kitchens. You can see what they're doing. I see the plates come up on the little rack, and that means food is done. And then I see him sit there for a while, and I see my pork chop. I'm like, oh, that pork chop looks really good. I wish it could get here right now. And so a lot of things happen from the time that food gets onto the counter to the time it gets onto your plate and then in my belly, right? So I thought that's a good analogy for how I look at the performance of a paper portfolio, a model portfolio. And there's a lot of model portfolios out there. We all know and love them. They help us out. They create efficiencies. They create diversification. But there's a difference between the model portfolio, which is the hot plate of food on the counter that just got finished, being plated by the chef, and what shows up into your portfolio, aka what shows up on the table and when it gets there.
Okay, I'm with you. So I see where the pork chop now comes into play with this analogy. So walk me through a little bit about what you want to comment on when it comes to the model portfolio and these hot plates.
Well, let's start with thinking about, okay, what is a model portfolio, right? Hopefully, a model portfolio is the best thinking at that point in time of the team that created it, right? And that doesn't matter where that came from, if it came from a big shop or an independent firm. That should be their best ideas about what they think is going to work in the marketplace and position your portfolio. From the time that they come up with those best ideas, there's a clock, right? We would assume that if there's information there, that information doesn't last forever, and we want to get it to our table and start eating it as quickly as possible. But there's a lot of things that can happen along the way. From a food perspective, you could have just a slow waiter. You might have 6 orders come to your table, and yours is up first, and all those orders are going to be causing delays from the time that you get your food. So a lot of things can happen that disrupt the delivery of that food. Just like in investments world, a lot of things can happen between the time that portfolio is formed and disseminated and when your portfolio that you own is actually traded. Things like transaction costs, right, will cause some friction. Things like tax considerations may mean that you don't actually trade that portfolio or trade on that information. Your advisor could be out on vacation and may not see the email come through until he gets back, right? So you may have a few days of lag. And so there are definitely real world considerations to take into consideration when you think about how much of that good information gets into your portfolio.
So I actually think that's very poignant because when I worked with large institutions, one of the biggest feedback pieces that I got from clients was, hey, there's this new headline or this new information is out. What is the investment team doing? And from my experience, the investment team always felt like a black box. Whenever we wanted to figure out why moves were being done or why moves weren't being done or how certain information was going to impact the portfolio, we kind of got a high-level response that we were supposed to tell people, but it didn't really answer the questions that people had. And I think that comes back to timing of execution and that information delay that you're talking about. So how do people solve for that? For example, they would have updated information about where we were in the economic cycle. And that would usually arrive early in the quarter, but we wouldn't actually release information about the economic updates till much later in the quarter when the information was stale. And the rebalancing that took place in these large portfolios for the proprietary funds would be scheduled well in advance. So it didn't feel as though you were bobbing and weaving with the market.
Let's go back to our Restaurant Week example.
Okay.
Now, Fidelity, the strategist there, right, the model construction team, their job is to serve up that dish, but they don't eat their own cooking, right? That dish sits on the ready to deliver shelf until somebody pulls it in and gets ready to eat it. But if the person that's cooking that dish never eats it, they don't care if it sits out for 3 or 4 days or a month and grows some mold and has flies and maggots growing on it. Their job is done, right? And that's kind of what you get with a model delivery team that's done by a team that's not, not being compensated based on the performance of those models, right? And we actually, not to throw any particular firm under the bus, but we had a call just last week with one of the larger, shops. Everybody would recognize their name if we said it on this podcast. And I did raise the question. I said, who is ultimately responsible for the performance of this model, and who's accountable if the model wins or loses, right? Whose personal and financial incentives are aligned with the performance of this model? And the answer was really nobody. And so the response was, well, if we put together a model and it's really bad, people are probably going to stop listening to it. But the answer should have been, if this model outperforms this person is going to see an increase in their bonus. And if this model underperforms, this person, and this person are not going to be working at Fidelity anymore. You never see that in the model space in an area where people are not eating their cooking.
So you think the issue kind of stems from an incentivization structure with the management of the fund?
Yeah, I mean, who said show me the incentive and I'll show you the outcome?
I forgot
somebody.
Who said that.
That's Warren Buffett's sidekick, Charles.
Charlie Munger.
Charlie Munger. Yeah, I think so. And so I think it's fair to say that the incentive models in most firms are a sales function, right? And so the purpose of a model is to present the product of that firm in an attractive light. And to also present that model in a way that makes the user of the model feel like there's something behind the scenes happening that's going to keep that model current, right? Models very, very rarely are an investments function where there's board reporting and the typical things that you would see where a portfolio manager or an investor is responsible for the performance of that portfolio.
All right, so pull the curtain back a little bit. Why would Avidian be different than some of these larger shops?
Well, number one, you have an investment team here that does eat their cooking. I'm personally invested in the model. That's 90% of my net worth is invested in Avidian models, maybe even higher than that. And so we do eat our own cooking from a personal utilization, which I think is important. I am also accountable for the performance. We have a performance measurement system. We treat our models like a portfolio. We look at each trade that we make, and then we do post-trade analysis on whether that trade added to the portfolio or did not, took away from performance. We have very specific benchmarks. We had an investment committee to review performance. We have a board that reviews the performance after the investment committee has looked at it. So it's very much of an institutional performance evaluation structure here, even though it's still, technically a model portfolio in name. We treat it like that is our own money, and we compensate people based on whether that model is doing well or not.
Well, you see, I always thought it was a matter of scale. Like when I worked at a large firm, the investment management component always seemed to be in a black box. And anytime there were complaints raised or maybe new information that was introduced to the public en masse, there was never really any movement from the investment team or any comment about the investment team or any explanation in general as to how this was going to impact portfolios or what they were going to do to account for it. And I just felt like that left a lot of clients wondering what's going to happen to my investments.
Yeah.
And so one of the big differentiators is like when you're vetting a investment, you're talking to me in financial planning some of the times just to make sure tax implications are accurate. Yep. I've never had that experience before where there's this really robust conversation about what investments are going to be most ideal for our clients.
Yeah, I mean that's a great point. Speaking of black boxes, I mean we do believe in transparency here at Avidian. We don't necessarily react to every piece of market information, but we do try to be very transparent with our advisors and our clients in terms of what we deem to be relevant. There was a time I worked in a black box. My skin got really pasty. It was just a difficult working environment. It was very quiet too. So we have shed that black box in every way, shape, or form as possible, and we try to be as transparent as possible here. But every investment team is going to have. There's going to be information that's relevant that we think moves markets and either impacts or adjusts our thesis on where we think markets are going. And then there's going to be noise, which noise is something that we are not going to react in terms of responding from a portfolio change. We may provide a comment, we may discuss it with advisors, but we're always clear to say that this is something that doesn't necessarily influence our view of the markets, but it is worthwhile discussing, and especially when clients see that new information and they might get concerned. A good example is the jobs number, right? Job revisions that came out.
800,000 down.
800,000 down, right? Where do those jobs go? And I don't want to theorize or get conspiratorial around why those jobs were reported in the first place and how that all works out. I know the people collecting and producing that data, they've got a hard enough job. There's a lot of people to count. But if you look at what we deem to be important, which is earnings, right? We are equity investors in a lot of different public companies, a lot of different private companies. The earnings that those firms have earned year to date will not change based on how many people we thought were working or we thought were at home not working, right? Those earnings are still, they're not subject to revision from that particular data point. So does that change our thesis going forward? No, that's a data series that we know is subject to substantial revisions as time goes on. And so the headline number is typically not something with much influence over markets. But it is worth, giving our guidance, our clients guidance that, yes, we see that information. It doesn't change our thesis, but we've looked at it.
So I'm starting to get a clearer picture on sort of this level of transparency and accountability and incentivization structure with the team here at Avidian. But could you elaborate a little bit more, like bring this to life to me, for me? What does this look like? What kind of boots are on the ground? What does the day-to-day look like when you're trying to really execute on these portfolios and models?
Yeah, so I think one of the exciting things that we've done here is I think we've actually built in some competitive advantages structurally to how we manage models and how we manage portfolios. And it really just boils down to getting the right people in the room talking at the same time, or talking to each other, right? Not everybody talking at the same time. And, when we outsource, if we were to outsource a model, right? Typically the way things work is a model, there's an investment team or a strategy team that'll build the model. They'll hand it off to somebody, likely in marketing or operations, to put it on some kind of platform. The advisor will get a notification. That notification will tell them, okay, there's something new to do. Then they'll start looking at their portfolio and maybe talking to a trader, right? So there's this very much, kind of long, drawn out, multi-step process where everybody has their job and nobody starts their job before the guy before them finishes their job, right?
It's all siloed.
It's all siloed, and that can take a while. That's your food sitting on that countertop, just, getting cold, getting just old and just less appetizing by the moment. What we've done, which I think is hard to do, it's costly to do, it's time consuming, it's labor intensive, but what we've done is we've got the team building the model and the team trading the model sitting in the same room as part of the same investment committee. So as we're talking about new opportunities or new investment decisions that we're going to make, the trader on his side of things is thinking, okay, how do I implement this? So when the decision is made to change an allocation, the trader already understands what he needs to do on his side. And then he's also already looped in advisors, individual client portfolios, and looked at them to see, okay, well, these client portfolios, maybe they have some tax considerations I need to look at from a special case standpoint. All those things take a lot of people working together, all pulling in the same direction to orchestrate.
I was going to add to that, it sounds like, particularly with the larger firms, people just kind of do their jobs in these silos, like I mentioned, where they're ticking a box. I got to do this, and then I got to do this, and then I got to do this. Whereas the picture you're painting is quite different. People are actually understanding in real time why certain decisions are being made. And so from my perspective, that makes me feel like they're going to be able to catch maybe an oversight in a more efficient way, or they might be able to identify opportunities quicker. And because of that collaborative environment, provide a better experience for the portfolios that they're modeling.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. And I mean, really, the main difference is everybody here, we're accountable to the client. When you outsource, right, the outsourced person, they're not accountable to the client, the end user. They're accountable just to the next person in the value chain, right? So philosophically, we've always done things a little bit differently here. Always been very client-centric in how we put together everything that we do.
That is very true, because I see you in client meetings, and I can tell you from my personal experience, I've never had the people who are managing the model portfolios in the room with the client asking them direct questions. I've never seen that before, with the exception of here at Avidian.
It's mind-blowing, isn't it?
It's a huge differentiator, because I could tell you, if I was a client, I would want to understand why the CIO is making certain decisions in the portfolios, or why the investment team is adding this new investment, and to have a resource there to answer those questions, I just think that's a level of transparency you don't see anywhere else.
Well, Robert, this has been fun as usual. Again, enjoy your Houston restaurant week. If you have any questions about your model portfolio or how Avidian might be able to help you out in that respect, check us out on avidianwealth.com.